Continuing with our series, Dumbfounding Definitions, Dizzying Distinctions, and Diabolical Doctrines, a series sorting through some of the jargon of philosophy. In this video, we're going to be answering the question, what is the philosophy of economics? Now, economics deals with a range of philosophical questions about things like causation, rationality, and value. Economics relies on a range of epistemic, metaphysical, and ethical assumptions in order to do its work. Just as philosophy of science studies the assumptions that underpin the scientific method, assumptions around how induction works or how individual events can give us proof of a broader, more general rule, philosophy of economics studies the assumptions that underpin the discipline of economics. In that economics is to a certain degree a science, philosophy of science has a part here, but because economics also has some normative components, there's other parts of philosophy that come in as well. Broadly, these assumptions of economics can be divided into three categories, at least the ones that philosophy cares about. Assumptions about rationality, assumptions about causation, and assumptions about ethics or value. In this video, we're going to briefly look at each of these categories. What makes someone rational? In economics, people are assumed to be rational, and economists use a very specific definition of rationality to do that. Now, this has run into some problems because psychology and behavioral economics have shown that when rationality is defined as economists traditionally define it, then it's demonstrably false that all humans are rational, or even that most humans are rational. Philosophers of economics care then not about the kind of empirical facts of the matter of do people fit a particular definition of rationality, but rather about what the best definition of rationality is, or what the correct definition of rationality is. If people don't fit a particular definition, maybe the problem isn't the people, maybe the problem is the definition. And so philosophers of economics ask questions around what is it to be rational, and how can we apply that definition, perhaps that better definition, to our economic models? For example, are we really irrational to dislike losses more than we like gains? Check out the idea of loss aversion if you're curious. Or is the economist's definition of rationality flawed? The next one is causation. Now, this goes all the way back to kind of the basics of philosophy of science, studying can induction work as a method to gain truth, as a method to gain knowledge, and we have other videos on that. But economists also claim to be able to show that certain phenomena cause other phenomena with varying degrees of certainty. But economists are talking about very broad phenomena of if you enact this policy on a country, then you will get this macroeconomic result from that country. And that becomes much more difficult than some of the kind of more basic things in the hard science. So this part of philosophy of economics is broadly an offshoot of philosophy of science, with the caveat that hard scientists have a much lower bar to pass than quote-unquote soft scientists. It should be easier to prove that certain chemicals will cause a certain reaction than that implementing a certain policy on a country will cause a certain outcome. That cutting interest rates will always have a certain outcome on a country. Because humans are notoriously unpredictable, and countries change in a broad way much more than the rules for chemical reactions. So, while certainly related to philosophy of science, this is more of a subdiscipline of it, looking at the claims that economists make based morally unjustified without an ethical theory behind it, particularly a policy decision framework like a cost-benefit analysis. Economics is in many ways just an outgrowth of philosophy. Adam Smith, arguably the father of economics, was a logic professor and a moral philosopher. The connection to axiomatic logic can still be seen in the core assumptions of economics. It's also deeply tied to utilitarianism and was shaped substantially by the works of John Stuart Mill, as can be seen in the connection to the basic units of economics being utility in many ways, and the goal of maximizing utility being one of the main goals of how economists compare the results of various policies on the world. Philosophy of economics, then, is the discipline that connects modern economics back to its roots, and to the logical and moral arguments which justify or fail to justify